Did you know that sweating in summer, shivering in winter, and seeing frogs in the rain and not in summer or winter are all responses to changing abiotic factors? Ever since organisms have come into existence on our planet, they have been evolving to survive better and reproduce in their habitats. However, the abiotic conditions of many habitats are never constant and keep changing significantly with time. These changes in abiotic conditions also affect the organisms living in that particular habitat. To sustain life, many species, through a process called homeostasis, try to maintain the constancy of their internal environment. Homeostasis is defined as a physiological process by which an organism regulates its internal environment in response to the fluctuating external environment. Although organisms achieve homeostasis through physiological means, it can also be achieved through artificial means, which is best seen in human beings. Consider that you can study well when the temperature is around 25 degrees Celsius. But in summer, the heat makes you lethargic and hence you are unable to concentrate. By simply using an air conditioner or a cooler, you can make your external environment pleasant so that you can perform better. Such artificial means do not exist for animals and plants in nature. So, how do they cope with such adverse situations? There are various ways by which organisms can respond to adverse external environments. They can regulate, conform, migrate, hibernate, estivate, or suspend themselves under such circumstances. Let's take a look at each situation. Organisms that are capable of maintaining homeostasis by physiological or behavioral means are called regulators. The mechanism by which organisms regulate their constant body temperature, irrespective of the external temperature, is called thermoregulation. Similarly, the mechanism by which organisms regulate a constant osmotic concentration, irrespective of the external osmotic concentration, is called osmoregulation. A few lower invertebrates and vertebrate species, along with birds and mammals, are capable of regulation. For instance, human beings are capable of regulating their body temperature and maintaining it at 37 degrees Celsius. For example, in summer, when the external temperature is more than our body temperature, we perspire a lot. This results in evaporative cooling, which lowers our body temperature. Likewise, in winter, when the external temperature is much lower than our body temperature, we shiver. Shivering generates heat and raises our body temperature. Such a mechanism is seen in mammals, but is absent in plants. Evolutionary biologists believe that the success of mammals is greatly due to their ability to maintain a constant body temperature, which enables them to survive in extreme climates. Some organisms that are unable to regulate their internal environment may partially regulate their internal environment or conform to external conditions. These organisms are known as conformers. Studies show that almost 99% of animals and nearly all plants belong to this category. the body temperature of such organisms changes according to the ambient temperature. Similarly, in the case of aquatic organisms, their osmotic concentration changes according to the ambient water osmotic concentration. Although maintaining a constant internal environment has advantages, conformers did not evolve into regulators. The reason is that processes like thermoregulation and osmoregulation consume a lot of energy, particularly in small animals, where heat loss or heat gain is a function of the surface area. Such animals have a larger surface area compared to their volume, and so they tend to lose their body heat very quickly when the outside temperature is low. Moreover, they consume a lot of energy to generate body heat, and this is why you rarely find small animals in the polar regions. Interestingly, during the course of evolution, the costs and benefits of maintaining a constant internal environment were taken into consideration, and thus some organisms have evolved to become regulators, while others have remained conformers. Sometimes, stressful external conditions may be localized or have a short duration. In such situations, organisms may migrate, hibernate, estivate, or suspend to survive. Particularly during winter, you may have read about or witnessed the arrival of migratory birds such as the greater flamingo, Siberian cranes, and northern shoveler from Siberia and other cold northern regions to the famous Keoladio National Park in Bharatpur in Rajasthan. Similarly, in Europe too, people staying high up in the Alps come down to the valleys during winter. Migration is seen in animals that are capable of moving from stressful environmental conditions to a place that offers a favorable climate. But what about animals that are unable to migrate? Such animals are likely to cope with the unfavorable conditions by undergoing hibernation during winter to preserve energy and estivation in summer to avoid heat-related problems and desiccation. Interestingly, many zooplanktons in lakes and ponds are known to enter diapause, a state of suspended development during unfavorable conditions. Although these mechanisms are seen in animals, plants too show various responses to stressful external conditions. They usually suspend themselves in unfavorable conditions. In the case of bacteria, fungi, and lower plants, thick-walled spores are produced, which help them survive in unfavorable conditions and germinate in favorable conditions. Similarly, in higher plants, seeds and other vegetative reproductive structures are produced, which help overcome stressful periods besides helping in dispersal. This is done by reducing their metabolic activity and undergoing a dormancy period. In favorable conditions, these seeds and vegetative reproductive structures germinate to form new plants. In this way, we see that to respond to stressful abiotic conditions, various organisms regulate, conform, migrate, hibernate, estivate, or suspend themselves. Some animals live in arid regions, while some animals thrive in polar regions. Plants in the tropical rainforests have drip tips and thick waxy surfaces that allow water to run off, while desert plants have spongy stems which store water and leaves reduced to tiny pointed spines. On our planet, every organism adapts to stressful environmental conditions through morphological, physiological, and behavioral means. In fact, the responses of these organisms are their adaptations to cope in unfavorable or stressful conditions. In other words, adaptation is any attribute of the organism that enables it to survive and reproduce in its habitat. Let's look at some of the morphological adaptations exhibited by organisms. Over the course of evolution, many adaptations have evolved and have been genetically fixed. Although life originated in water and is unable to sustain without it, some organisms can survive without water for days. In the case of the kangaroo rat in the North American deserts, the animal meets its water requirements by metabolic water. Metabolic water is released as a byproduct during oxidation of fat in its body. The body of this rodent is also capable of concentrating its urine so that very little water is used to remove waste products. Likewise, the camel can also survive without water for 10 days at a stretch and is capable of raising its body temperature to nearly 42 degrees Celsius to prevent the loss of water. Similarly, many desert plants have a thick layer of cuticle on their leaves with their stomata embedded in deep pits to reduce the loss of water through transpiration. These plants have also adopted a special photosynthetic pathway called CAM, or crassulacean acid metabolism, which enables their stomata to remain closed during the day. Some desert plants, like the opuntia, have leaves that are reduced to spines, and its flattened spongy stems perform photosynthesis. While some plants and animals have adapted to prevent the loss of water, some animals, particularly those found in colder regions, have adapted themselves to prevent the loss of heat. For instance, mammals from colder climates generally have shorter tails, limbs and ears, which help reduce loss of heat. This adaptation is called Allen's rule. Moreover, in the polar seas, aquatic mammals such as seals, whales and dolphins have a thick layer of fat known as blubber below their skin, which acts as an insulator and minimizes the loss of body heat. Apart from morphological adaptations, some organisms physiologically adapt themselves to respond to stressful situations. For example, as you ascend a mountain, atmospheric pressure and oxygen decrease, and you begin to experience altitude sickness. Its symptoms are fatigue, nausea, and palpitations. But in 2 to 3 days, your body gets acclimatized to such stressful conditions, after which you don't experience altitude sickness. This is because your body has increased the production of red blood cells, decreased the binding capacity of hemoglobin, and increased your rate of breathing to compensate for low levels of atmospheric oxygen. This also explains why tribes living in high altitudes have higher hemoglobin than those dwelling in the plains. While some organisms adapt themselves to live in high altitudes, a variety of marine invertebrates such as jellyfish, octopus, starfish, and fish such as the anglerfish and lanternfish thrive in deep ocean waters, where the pressure could be 100 times more than the normal atmospheric pressure. Such organisms show a fascinating array of biochemical adaptations to survive in such extreme conditions. Another interesting adaptation is by organisms found in harsh habitats such as deep-sea hydrothermal vents and hot springs, where temperatures exceed 100 degrees Celsius. Here, microbes belonging to the Archaebacteria form flourish. While some organisms thrive in temperatures above 100 degrees Celsius, other organisms flourish in the Arctic and Antarctic waters, where temperatures are always below zero. Apart from physiological and morphological adaptations, some organisms also show behavioral adaptations to cope with their changing environment. For example, the desert lizard manages to keep its body temperature fairly constant by absorbing heat while lying in the sun when its body temperature is below normal. But when the ambient temperature is high, it moves into the shade. Likewise, some organisms such as earthworms, frogs, moles, and snakes burrow into the soil to escape the above-ground heat. Therefore, these animals are rarely seen on the ground in scorching summers. In this way, to adapt to unfavorable conditions, organisms have undergone morphological, physiological, and behavioral changes.